Hello, my name's David, and I'm here to help you fall asleep. So, in this Sleep Talk Down story, I'm going to tell you a little bit about my great-grandfather, who I never met. And you're welcome to listen and relax, and I encourage you to just drift off to sleep. At the end of the recording, I'll simply stop talking. So with that said, I'm going to take this opportunity to say, if you'd like to hear more recordings like this to help you drift off into a deep sleep, go ahead and subscribe. I upload new content every week. Alright, so let's get started. Go ahead, lie down, and get comfortable. Feel free to close your eyes. Maybe take a few deep breaths. And I'll start talking. I never met my grandfather on my mother's side. He died about 10 years before I was born. From everything I've heard about him, he seemed like a pretty interesting guy. But this is a story about his father, who died about 10 years before that. Now, no one really talked much about him. My mother occasionally mentioned my great-grandfather, but the things she did tell me were quite interesting. So I've sort of pieced together an idea, roughly, of who the guy might have been. Now, one of the things that she told me that caught my attention was that my grandfather, or my great-grandfather I should say, her grandfather, once rode with Jesse James, or maybe it was Billy the Kid. The story goes he was out riding his horse, and there was another kind of cowboy out there riding his horse, and they rode along together for a while, and just sort of loped along and chit-chatted, and then met up with some other people riding along the road, and the lone cowboy kind of rode off in a different direction, and one of the other people told my great-grandfather, "You know who that was you were riding with?" And he said, "No." And I said, "That was Billy the Kid." Because the story's a little unclear. Could have been Billy the Kid, could have been Jesse James. Now, the fact that maybe he rode with him for a half hour or so, it still allows you to say, I rode with Jesse James, or Billy the Kid. Now, that story intrigued me as a boy. Later on, I did a little research, and I found that both Billy the Kid, and Jesse James both died sometime in the 1880s. Now, my great-grandfather was born in the mid-1870s, so there is a possibility that the story's true. But that would mean, at most, my great-grandfather was a 10-year-old kid when he rode with Jesse James or Billy the Kid. But who knows? Now, what I do know is he was born in Texas in 1876. And it's interesting to think, just a couple generations back, for me, someone was born right after the Civil War. Seemed so long ago. But apparently he was born in Texas, eventually made his way to Oklahoma. My grandfather, so this guy's son, and his wife, my grandmother, they moved from Oklahoma to the Central Valley in California during the 1930s. If you asked my grandmother if it was anything like The Grapes of Wrath, she said, "Oh no, nothing like that. Those people were low class." Now, one of my mother's older sisters, who was born in Oklahoma and moved out to California as a young child, she had a memory that she liked to tell about how when they got to California, they went into a big store. She'd never seen anything like it before. Basically, it was a department store. And in this big store, they went into a small room off to the side. And in the small room, the doors closed. They got jostled a little bit, and the doors opened, and there was a different store in front of them. That was her first experience in an elevator. But it's interesting to, if you've ever read The Grapes of Wrath, for me, I imagine there were quite a few similarities between the characters in that story and my grandparents. They settled in the Central Valley of California. They'd been farmers in Oklahoma, and they continued farming in California. And eventually, my grandfather's brothers and sisters all moved out to California as well, and settled in and about the same general area in the valley there. Now, the stories that I've heard about my great-grandfather is that he moved out as well, and after his wife died, who would have been my great-grandmother, he just sort of drifted around. He would stay with his adult children until their wives or husbands got sick of him and encouraged him to move on to the next brother or sister. So this went on for years. He'd stay for a while and then kind of wear out his welcome and be sent off, and he'd head out to the next one. And the story goes, he had a moped. Now, he died in 1956, so it's interesting to picture an old guy on a moped traversing the farm roads of the San Joaquin Valley with probably a duffel bag over his shoulder. Now, all the men in that side of the family were all good mechanics, always working on trucks and tractors. I imagine this guy with an old moped, kind of a jalopy, parts falling off of it, having to continually tinker with it to keep it running, hopping on that thing and just heading down a dusty road. You can almost imagine a younger version of Billy the Kid riding along next to him on a little moped. And now my mother told a story about how one time when he was visiting with their family, I guess he was supposed to watch my mother. She was the youngest child. And he took her to a restaurant in town that she'd never been to before. She said she remembered it was different than other restaurants. There was one big table with high chairs, and they sat there, and he bought her Coca-Cola. Now, in those days, when my mom was a small child, kids didn't drink Coke after Coke. You didn't get free refills. She said it was kind of a big deal to get a Coca-Cola. But she recalls they sat there all afternoon, and my great-grandfather, her grandfather, just bought her Coke after Coke after Coke, and she was happy as a clam, just sitting there drinking her Coca-Cola. what she realized later was he was supposed to be watching her, and the activity they ended up doing was heading down to the bar, and he sat there drinking at the bar with his granddaughter, and to keep her happy, he just kept buying her Coca-Colas. I wonder what it was like in a different time. The world we live in today, things move fast. You adapt, you change. But what was it like 50 years ago, 100 years ago? Could a 10-year-old just head out on a horseback, riding down a dusty road, and end up riding with an infamous outlaw? Who knows? That's how the story goes, anyhow. Well, I hope you enjoyed that story. And I hope you drift off into a pleasant sleep and have nice dreams.